questions. I would like to ask you to be very brief, please, because of an issue of time here. First, Ambassador Antoine from Grenada, and then the two ladies on my right that had asked the floor for a long time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very stimulating presentation. You have caused me to think, and I have a compounded question. Do you think that the sources of funding received by Transparency International, organization like Gallup, would in some way skew the indices that you use to come up with your labels? In addition, where can you point to best practices, societies that you can label? I note that you have a 3 and a 5 scale, which you have identified as grades, so to speak. It is useful also to hear from you about when the steam of the corruption fight began. It was at a time when the international financial institution and the developed countries appeared to have been failing in their promises to provide aid to the developing world. Share your thought on that question, please.
He's getting back to me because my CV was a bit longer than he wanted. Well, I can tell you that in terms of Gallup, Gallup does this in a very professional way. That's why we use Gallup in terms of their surveys. And in terms of skewing, I can tell you how the Corruption Perception Index is done, and you will see, because people think that it's Transparency International that sits at a table one day and starts ranking countries. It's not exactly how it happens. What we do is we use the surveys of between 3 and 12 different independent survey organizations. The World Economic Forum, Freedom House, are some of the examples. The Economist, who do these regular surveys, and there are questions that are there that are particular to our interest. And we use these surveys, and these surveys are of the so-called experts in the countries and those who work with the countries. For example, there would be the economists in the countries, some bankers, some business sectors, some academics, who are directly invited to comments. So it's from within the countries and from those working with the countries. And this is how the CPI, the Corruption Perception Index, is established. So it's, it's not us just making a list of countries, as I mentioned. And for that purpose, we utilize, because these are there, we have agreements with these organizations to use their information as to who supports the Economist. I guess the people who buy the Economist, for example, or the World Economic Forum are the senior leaders in industry who are part of that. In terms of your last question about the IMF, and I presume you were speaking as well about the other financial international institutions. I think that donors consistently, I having been part of one a number of years ago, keep agonizing as to whether the support, the cooperation that you provide is the one that works the best. And we keep trying to work with countries. There's no question that I think there was a period in our history, in going back, that whether it was international financial institutions or some bilateral donors or all, thought that they had the answer to various countries' development. And I think it became clear, and I see a good friend who was at the OECD at a certain time as chair of the DAC, where together with a number of other colleagues, we really said, obviously this does not work It's got to be the country's development, and we're there to support it in whatever is the most appropriate way and means that we have. Has enough money been provided? Has enough equalization of resources been provided? I can tell you no, very honestly. And I said that too when I was responsible for an agency. I think that we need to share our resources, our richness, much more than we are doing until now, and to continue to find, in an ongoing way, better ways of working with our colleagues from developing countries around the world, so that we don't have these levels, so-called levels, in the future, that there is prosperity around the world and much greater equity in that.
Thank you. The lady with the red blouse there, and then the other lady on the right, and then we'll give Ms. Lavelle the opportunity to close.
Madame Lavelle, c'est un grand plaisir de vous voir dans cette salle. My name is Ingrid Knudsen. I'm with the Canadian Mission to the Organization of American States. The Organization of American States, this Thursday, November 30th, will be holding a Transparency Convention first meeting of states parties on conventional weapons acquisitions. I thought you should know that this meeting is open to the public as observers, and civil society will be participating as a guest speaker. You've spoken very effectively about natural resource industries and the opportunities that they present for corruption. I wonder if you have something to say to us, any knowledge that Transparency International might have with regard to weapons and arms industries and their opportunities for corruption and the importance of a transparency convention. Thank you.
My name is Mary Mullen, and I work with the Bosnia Support Committee. I was wondering what Transparency International can do if a human rights group in a country reports that there is corruption in the government, but is maybe afraid of the government or afraid they might be thrown out of the country. And I also wanted to mention that in Great Britain, or in England, there is a cap when in elections for people running for elections, whereas in the United States, our Supreme Court said that we couldn't have a cap on money going to people running for elections. I was wondering if you could distinguish the two as what does not lead to corruption and helps a more honest election.
Thank you. Ingrid, great to see you again. What we have been doing is related but not at all directly dealing with your point. We have been doing a work on defense industry because this is where there is a lot of money and there is a lot of corruption. Some of the areas that we've worked on, and I'll come back to the arms question, major areas that we've worked on have been banking, construction and engineering, extracting industry, defense industry, and now on forestry and water as some of the major areas, Nancy, I think that we have been working on over the years. We have been very concerned that a lot of the corruption money and a lot of the money laundering, which usually is the result of it, feeds the illicit trade in arms, in armaments around the world, in particular in certain parts of the world. So this is an area that we have not been working on in exactly the way that you have identified, but I'm very interested to know about this conference, and I wish I were in Washington still, since the door is open to people to attend. On the question of human rights, I think I was at the convention that I mentioned in Guatemala, there were a number of organizations involved with human rights, because there is no question that some of these organizations may find it difficult to denounce publicly that, you know, they have seen acts of corruption for their own life or for being sent out of the country, actually, for being exiled. We have starting a very interesting project in Central and Eastern Europe, which is now beginning to spread. And these are sort of a legal aid program, whereby if a firm, it could be a business sector, it could be an individual, it could be an organization, feel that or that they have witnessed or that they have been there's been active extortions to themselves, can come. We do not investigate ourselves in any kind of detailed way, but we do enough work and we use legal aid professionals and students in senior programs of law in those countries, working together. And then we help those individuals to know where to go, because very often they do not know where to go to put the information that they have and to receive an appropriate hearing. So it doesn't go as far as some people would like, but it's at least a beginning in this respect. In terms of caps on political parties, there is no question that part of the solution is disclosure and appropriate audit, but another part of the solution is also in looking to the future, a particular, a cap on the donations. And now a number of countries have instituted those, and some are quite severe. In some countries, you cannot, put more than $5,000 or $1,000. Unions cannot contribute. There are certain groups who, as a group, could be so important that they could skew the result. So I think that the question of cap is one that is interesting to look at where it's been put into place, and one that the experience of those countries ought to be shared with others. And going back to the OAS, what can OAS do? This is an area that OAS can help various countries to share their experience with each other, because the experience on capping in many countries is not of long standing. It's relatively recent for most of the countries who now have a cap. Okay.
Thank you very much, Madame Lavelle, for your tremendous contribution today to this ongoing dialogue, which clearly is the concern of the member states, stated in their summit declarations, Summits of the Americas declarations, and I would call those the words, but also in their plans of actions, and that's the acting that you challenge us all to go into, and clearly the convention, MESISIC, are steps in that direction, and I'm sure the countries will continue working to make sure that these become real, these words become a reality in the hemisphere. I also, from the whole of the Americas, would like to thank this audience today, also those that tune into the lecture series of the Americas across the hemisphere and beyond, and also our partners that disseminate the lecture series either by satellite or webcast, particularly HITN, EduSat, Voice of America, Venevisión Continental, and other TV and radio channels that carry the broadcast to the member states. I don't want to forget our major partners. We have here Dean Sanabria from the Law School of the Universidad San Martín de Porres that has been with us since the beginning of the lecture series. We are now in our 17th lecture, and also, of course, our other partners, the Hellenic Republic and the State of Qatar. I would like to invite you all and the audience in the hemisphere to tune us again on the 23rd of January, when we will have the 18th lecture of the Americas with the Senator Soledad Alvear from Chile. Thank you very much to you all.